A warm welcome to all of you winter-weary Minnesotans. Many thanks for joining us for the fourth and final lecture of the 2009 Insights Lecture Series. I'm Colleen Pittner, AIGA's Programming Director for Insights and Co-Director of Education. It's my job to test the mic and make a few announcements about some exciting upcoming events sponsored by AIGA. Even if it's snowing, please join your friends and colleagues for Cocktails for Creatives this Thursday evening, April 2nd from 6 to 8 p.m. at Design Within Reach in Uptown. You can celebrate surviving yet another Minnesota winter. Then let your inner typographer loose by taking part in Smashing Alphabets, a hands-on font-making workshop led by local typographer and guru Cenk Diesel on Wednesday, May 6th from 2 to 5:30 p.m. You can register online at minnesota.aiga.org. And finally, AIGA's 16th Annual Portfolio One-on-One event will be held April 24th and 25th at Solera in downtown Minneapolis. This is a not-to-be-missed opportunity to participate in the largest portfolio reviewing event in the country. Check out the AIGA website to register, and students, this is the place where you download applications for the Larson and AIGA Design Leaders Scholarships. Speaking of scholarships, I would like to take this opportunity to personally thank all of those generous members of our design community who each contributed $100 to the AIGA Design Leaders Scholarships that will be awarded at Portfolio One-on-One. I'd like you to please bear with me while I embarrass each one of them in public. My sincere thanks to Andrew Blauvelt, John Dufresne, Chuck Anderson, Damian Wolf, Jim Madsen and George Brewston, Bruce Bourne, Sharon Werner, Sue Krolik, Heather Olson, Cheryl and Mark Watson, Seth Johnson, Monica Little, Jane Tilka and Mike Reed, Derek and Tessa Sussner, Doug Powell and Leisha Schwartz, Jamie Erickson, Dan Wojcik, Jay Miller, Lillian Hall, Pam Arnold, I'm almost done, Catherine Frime, Linda Henneman, Lynn Schrader, Chris Lang, Ed Bennett, Bruce Eaton, and me. Special thanks to Tim Larson, who donates $1,500 for the Larson Scholarship every year. If you would like to join this impressive list of donors, please see Seth Johnson or me after the lecture. Shameless solicitors that we are, we happen to have a few extra donation forms with us tonight. So on with the show. It is my pleasure and privilege to introduce Andrew Blauvelt, Design Director at the Walker Art Center. AIGA is grateful to Andrew and his superhero design team for partnering with AIGA Minnesota to make this lecture series possible. So please join me in giving a warm, rousing round of applause to Andrew.
I might have given $200 if I know. Thank you, Colleen. Well, welcome to the final in the series, which I think has been a really great series this year of Insights 2009, which of course has been a partnership with AIGA Minnesota for since '86. That goes back. There's just a couple more announcements that we have at the Walker, and also in partnership with AIGA Minnesota, 3 events that are upcoming that you should take note of. On Thursday, April 30th, we will have the regional premiere of Objectified, which is a new documentary film about product design. And Gary Hutzwit, who was the director of Helvetica, has done this new film, his next film, and he'll be here to answer questions after the 7 p.m. screening. And we also have a 9 p.m. screening to which he'll do the introduction for. And then about a month later, on Thursday, May 28th, another film screening. This one, I think, is a U.S. premiere of Milton Glaser, To Inform and Delight, by first-time director Wendy Key, who will also be here at the 7 p.m. screening to do a Q&A. With us, and we will also have a 9 o'clock screening. I just wanted to note that if you had tried to purchase tickets for the Glaser film and were unable to do so, you should now be able to do it. I think there was a small glitch in that. So please, there's a card that's going out now that's double-sided for about both films, so we encourage you to attend those. And then, because we can't have enough design programming, we're also squeezing in a special event, which is Designing Obama, which is sponsored by SAPI and will be in partnership with AIGA Minnesota. We don't have a date yet, but it will be sometime in either April or May, also on a Tuesday night like this. And it'll include designers Saul Sender and Scott Thomas, who developed the web and, well, the overall branding for the Obama, the official branding. No Shepard Fairey, he was here already. He's probably in jail still, so or in court with the AP. But we'll have the official designers for those at this event. And just to note that all lectures, including all the design presentations, are streamed live and webcast live on the Walker channel. And that material becomes archived also on the Walker channel, but it's also available now at iTunes U. And we've been doing some Twitter groups online, and that's been pretty lively and very well attended, I guess, in a virtual sense. So, on to tonight. It's actually a very, I'm very pleased to introduce tonight's speaker. I've been working on Ellen, working her over the years, to come lecture at the Walker. We're always trapped on Marches and Tuesday, which has always been a struggle because Ellen, unlike myself, is a very good teacher and will not give up her students very easily to come here to lecture, but somehow it worked out this year, and we're really grateful for her to take time out of her busy schedule to come. Ellen, of course, is a graphic designer who, with her husband and fellow designer J. Abbott Miller, emerged on the design scene in the 1980s, bringing with them a breath of fresh critical air. Their early work together as design writing research would serve as a template for many of the activities they both continue to engage in today, sometimes separately, sometimes together. Their intellectual curiosity and desire to expand the possibilities of work and practice as designers help pave the way for today's hybrid practices. It's nearly impossible to outline all of the many important projects that Ellen has brought to the public, but communicating the significance of design to society and culture at large has been at the heart of Ellen's work. What hasn't she done? Ellen is an award-winning designer and author of numerous books on subjects ranging from D.I.Y. culture to typography. Signed copies are available in the Walker shop. A little plug. A columnist for Readymade magazine, a curator at the Cooper-Hewitt National Design Museum in New York, where she has curated such exhibitions as Mixing Messages and Skin, an educator who is the director of the MFA program in graphic design at Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore. And in recognition of these and many other successful pursuits, she is also the recipient of the 2007 AIGA Gold Medal, the profession's highest honor. Please help me welcome Ellen Lupton.
Whoops, okay. I can't trust Colleen to test the microphone, so I'm testing it too. Anyway, thank you very much. Thanks to the Walker. Thanks to the executives at AIG. for making this event possible. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm going to talk about designer as author, which kind of takes me back in history to, as Andrew just said, to the early days of my career when this term first started being used. And looking at it now, I'm like, well, what is it with that as in the middle, designer as author? It immediately puts this element of doubt, like maybe my talk should be called designer as author, right? Like, is it some kind of make-believe, like designer as superhero or designer as American Idol contestant, like something that we might pretend to be? It always has a little bit of that feeling, like, are we allowed to do this yet? So I thought I would just go back in time to back in history, back to the 1890s or 1990s or whatever century it might be. You know, we were very sad back then because graphic design was so marginalized. When I first started studying design and practicing design, nobody knew what it was. The New York Times would refer to it as graphics design, which was really humiliating. Finally, they got the S out of the word. And so somehow, we were all sad about being at the edges of society and sitting there in the cafe, and we thought, well, maybe if we were authors, it would be better. There was always that cliche, and it continues to this day. My mother doesn't understand what I do. Now, that's a serious problem, people. If your mother doesn't understand what you do, we are definitely not getting the message out. And that's like one of my passions, is to, at least when I die, to know that my mother understood what I did. But if she doesn't get what graphic design is, well, maybe we'll do better if we call ourselves authors. So I did a little research, and I think that the person that first started publishing this term, designer as author, is Rick Poynter, a great design critic and someone who's devoted his life to writing about design and being a real author, right, who doesn't have any as in his title. He's just an author. And he wrote a piece in Blueprint magazine in 1991 called The Designer as Author. And he was particularly using the term not to talk about designers as writers, but talking about the designer as someone who, at that point in time, was emerging as someone with a signature style, where the very way of creating design was its own kind of text that would sit on top of the client's message. And that was called postmodernism by many of us, and it was the idea of design being a kind of interruption of the communication stream and not a kind of transparent window onto it. And that's what Rick meant by designer as author when he used it. He was also editor of I magazine, and in 1996, he commissioned Michael Rock to write a piece for the magazine called Designer as Author, and that piece became a kind of legendary text within the design field and inspired a lot of people to call themselves authors, even though Michael, in his essay, actually was very discouraging about that idea and said, don't bother, it's a completely bankrupt notion, because the great post-structuralist writers of the 60s and 70s had already figured out that the author was dead. So leave it to graphic designers to choose to be the dead thing, right? That now that no one else wanted to be an author, maybe we could be. So Roland Barthes wrote this essay in 1968 called The Death of the Author, and he talked about the change in writing, that the whole idea of the author was something from print culture. It was something from the Enlightenment and the idea of authority and the author controlling the text and turning the text into a kind of capitalist product that was fixed in time and bore the name of that person. And that in postmodern times, the text is open and it flows and it's made of all different pieces of society, and really the author doesn't originate. He may put his name on it, but actually all literature comes from all different sources. And so he proclaimed the death of the author and the birth of the reader, right? And so graphic designers became authors, but also readers. The idea that what we could do with typography and page layout was basically to screw with the author's text, right? And it was no longer sacred, and we could mess with it. And that was a kind of writing. Bruce Mal published this book in 1996, and it was featured in Michael Rock's legendary essay. And Bruce Mal really, he was an author, is an author in the old-fashioned sense. He's the guy that wants his name on the cover of the book. And believe me, getting Rem Koolhaas to put the graphic designer's name on the cover was probably not easy, right? And so if we think about that word author, at the core of it is, it's the same as authority. It's that signature, it's that stamp, it's that brand, it's that mark of authority. And I think Bruce Mal did a lot for our profession by getting his name on the cover of that book. And certainly that's part of what designers were looking for, was more authority. What Michael Rock was really interested in his essay was not that kind of authorship, not the Bruce Mal kind, but the stylistic kind, the kind that Rick Poynter had originally been writing about. And he uses the term designer as auteur. It's a term from film theory, where film critics were trying to look at how can film be an art form when so many people are involved, right? And we can say that about graphic design, like how can this be art when there's an editor and a client and a printer and a proofreader? Like, I can't control the whole process. It's so collaborative. So the idea of the auteur is that a filmmaker, a great filmmaker like a Hitchcock, puts his signature on everything simply through the way he makes the film. And Michael Rock said that's how we can become true auteurs or authors. It's not through the content, it's through how you make the design. It's through the visual style. So this was a very influential article, and even though Michael Rock was saying, like, don't do this, lots of people said, let's do it. Okay, graphic designers are very ornery that way, right? And even if we read something in a magazine, we might not pay attention, we might be authors anyway. I kept being an author. People like Stephen McCarthy kept being an author. Lots of teachers talk to their students about being authors and about initiating work, not just stylistically. I've never been good at style. So the only kind of author I could be is like the kind that actually made a book or wrote an article or curated an exhibition. And so the idea of authorship became, in the late 90s, and I think until today, really associated with the notion of self-initiated projects. And not so much about style, but about designers creating products, creating books, creating exhibitions. It can be commercial or non-commercial, but it's about initiating the project. Michael Rock got really mad about that people still kept calling themselves authors so definitively. So he wrote a piece in 2005 called Fuck Content, where he said, guys, this authorship thing has got to end. We really got to stop worrying about being authors in that sense and focus on style. It's a pretty smart, really concise article. I urge you to read it. Of course, I disagree with a lot of what's going on there, but I think there's a lot of brilliance to it, so that graphic designers continue to have this anxiety, right, about not being good enough, and sometimes we try to fill in that anxiety by saying, well, if only we could create the content, we would feel better, we would feel more like useful members of society and not hairdressers or something. And Michael Rock said, just be the hairdresser. It's awesome. Okay, make really beautiful stuff. That's your signature. And some designers are great at that, and some of them aren't so much. And of course, it brings to mind the whole debate that's gone on for over a century and beyond about form versus content. And can you separate them? We tend to try to think of them as separate, and yet all graphic designers know that they're very connected and that the form is always going to influence the content. Ferdinand de Saussure was a linguist, Swiss linguist at the turn of the century, and he had a metaphor that, to me, totally explains the form-content problem. He said, form and content is like a sheet of paper, and one side is content, and the other side is form. So they're opposite, and they can't quite talk to each other, but you can't separate them. There's no way to divide them. They're always connected. Well, Michael Rock wants people to stay on the form side, but some of us have always insisted on jumping onto the content side and folding up the paper and working with both. So I've continued to be interested in designers and authors, designers as authors, authors as designers, because that's happening a lot too. There's a lot of people out there who are doing both, who are playing with both. I've always played with both. This is the book that Abbott Miller and I published in 1996 called Design, Writing, Research, which was our kind of manifesto of the connection of these media, that design is a form of writing, and writing is a form of design, and through practice, you create research. There's a page from that book. And there's lots of people, I mean, I become interested in people who are doing this not within the design field, but really within literature. So Jonathan Safran Foer is considered one of the great young writers of our time, and he's very involved with typography. He works a lot with type and typesetting and the composition of the page in his work. Sort of insane kerning that goes truly crazy. He's sort of Lemony Snicket for adults. Or this amazing book by Graham Rowell called Woman's World, which is just coming out this month in paperback. I totally recommend it. It's a novel that was made completely by cutting out scraps of paper from women's magazines from the 1960s. So it's completely a collage. But what's amazing to me about it is not just that collaged element, but it's like a great story, and that you constantly move in and out of the story and the form of the story, the form and the content. Roland Barthes would have been very proud because it's made out of quotations. It's made out of stuff that already exists. It's made out of ads and advice columns and all kinds of the kind of everyday discourse of women in the 60s turned into this very, very dark story about sexual identity and crime and mystery. It's really fantastic. Or this book by Leanne Shapton, who's a graphic designer and illustrator. And she wrote a novel that takes the form of an auction catalog. So it's a love story about a love gone bad. Two people fall in love, and when they break up, they decide to auction off all of their possessions. And so the novel is told page by page as lot descriptions of their objects. It works about, I'd say, 90% as a story. You know, you have to stay with it. But most designers would stay with it just because the objects are cool, and the guy is played by Paul Sayre, who's really a cute graphic designer. So, you know, one of the things that strikes me about these examples in particular is that they're all written very well. And often when we use the term author, we immediately think of a writer, right? But are graphic designers up to that job, right? That's a pretty challenging thing to do. I was desperate over the weekend, so I posted a thing on Facebook. I asked, into the void, is it easier for a designer to become an author or the other way around? I was surprised by how many people responded, and here's a few of the things that came up. A lot of opinions. Brian Collins was very forthright, saying that, hey, what we do as graphic designers is communicate all the time with words. We tell stories. We explain what we do, we talk to clients, we call up our mother and tell her what a graphic designer is. Like, this is part of the job, right? So we're constantly doing this stuff. And maybe the writers aren't always making visual material. Rebecca Mendez was kind of on the other side. She said that, her problem is that her students have a lot of trouble creating their own problems, setting their own material. I like this expression, download versus upload. That authoring is uploading, and maybe just having a client is more downloading. Or Kevin Fitzgerald, who pointed right to what's been bothering me, which is how can you be an author if you can't write? And there's a lot of books out there that have a designer's name on them, but they might not be very well written. Meanwhile, there's a lot of changes in the way people are learning to write in college. So there's a whole movement of teaching writing as a visual form. This is from just a stack of freshman writing textbooks that I've been collecting, which approach writing as a visual form. They get students to work with layout and web pages and technology as part of writing. And some of them are pretty good. A lot of them actually use the term graphic design, which is pretty cool. When I studied English in college, no one said graphic design. And now this is really part of the conversation. So here's a project in a writing book to design your own business card. Now, I know all of you can make a much better business card than that, but to me it's pretty intriguing that in a writing class, design tools are being taught. And that makes me a little bit worried, we better be doing the same thing in our design classes and making sure that designers are learning to write. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the projects that I've been doing as a writer, right? Where I write these things, but they're often very collaborative. This is a book I did with my graduate students at MICA, where my students created all the content. They wrote the articles. We produced the book in 9 months as a school project. And our goal was to create a book about design for everyone. And I believe that just like all the writers should be learning to design and the designers should be learning to write, we should be out there raising the value and the aesthetic quality of what's happening in the world. So we're at a moment in time when more and more people are using design in their life. They're exposed to it through technology. And we have an opportunity as a field to make it better, to provide them with better tools and better information. So we did our chapter on business cards. I think a business card, everybody should have at least 5, right, for all your different identities. A boy card, a girl card, your dog walker card, right, all the different ways that we are. I think when people who are not professionals use design in their life, it's usually because they want to do something with it. They don't just do design for its own sake, but they have some action that they want to perform. So here's just some pages from the Do-It-Yourself book, our kind of mini lesson in typography. A business card is really a typographic self-portrait. And we show, the beautiful, the ugly, the extreme, all the possibilities of design. You can even make a business card out of a brownie or a Martha Stewart paint chip with a rubber stamp, right? Trying to open up people to the range of possibilities in terms of production and thinking with design. Last fall, my students and I published a book for authors, a book called Indie Publishing, How to Design and Produce Your Own Book. And it's part of our thinking about sharing design processes and design techniques with other audiences that might want them. So part of the whole do-it-yourself revolution is affecting the publishing industry. There's lots and lots more opportunities for independent authors to get their own work out into the world using technology, digital print on demand, handmade books, all of that interfacing with the internet. There's a whole new possibility for young writers to get their stuff out there. Of course, not everybody finds it easy to get published, especially in the traditional publishing world. This is a rejection letter. Very sad. Young woman wrote a proposal for a novel called Sexy Librarian. And she sent her proposal off to all the main romance publishers and received back rejection letters. Her name is Julia Wiest, and she presented these rejection letters as a work of art in her senior exhibition at Cooper Union in New York. And I happened to attend her exhibition, and we were working on this independent publishing book, and I saw her rejection letters. And I thought, what could be better novel to feature in our book than a rejected novel, right? Because independent publishing is all about getting away from these people, right? These heartless interns who probably didn't even read her manuscript before filling in the blank and sending it back to this well-meaning young author, right? I mean, most of them, it's so heartless. Although I must say there's nothing quite as amusing as reading someone else's rejection letters. Very satisfying. Here I think that the editor did take time to read the proposal, and you get more of a sense. So at the opening, I tracked down Julia Weitz, and I said, Julia, I really love your rejection letters, and I'd like to publish your novel. I had a business card and everything, very professional, and she sort of looked at me and she says, oh, no, it's an art piece. It's all about rejection, and if you publish it, it won't be rejected anymore, and it won't be my art piece. And I said, oh, I'm really sorry, but, whatever. Call me if you change your mind. So 2 weeks later, she's graduated from college, and suddenly it seemed like not such a bad idea to have her novel published. So she called me up and said, hey, would you still like to publish the novel? And so we did. We did it as a project at MICA. It was our test case, published, designed by one of my students, Christian Bjornard, and we took it from start to finish, very professional job, and turned Sexy Librarian into a book. So this is the cover of the book. It's actually a photograph of a book that becomes the whole cover there. And then that becomes the chapter on fiction and how to publish your own novel if you get rejected. Now you can do it yourself. We use print-on-demand technology, which is fabulous. We got the book on Amazon. We got some reviews. We got some press. We got to stir up some excitement over the book. That's what it's all about. This is from our 10 painstaking, ass-breaking, mind-numbing, and totally essential steps for publishing your own novel. The first step is to write the novel. Right, and then the rest is the endless process of editing and proofing and designing and creating the cover and all of that, and proofing it again and so forth. You definitely need patience to publish your own novel. And then we look at page layout. So the first layout that Christian did was kind of based on mass market paperback books with very narrow margins, so it looked nice and cheap, like something you might buy at the supermarket. Unfortunately, that didn't waste enough space, because Sexy Librarian is really not that long a book, and so we wanted it to have a little bit of a spine, a little bit of heft, and that was really not doing it. So the second design that he came up with was kind of a Leonardo da Vinci, with the golden section and this kind of magical proportions and so forth. And that seemed like way too pretentious for Sexy Librarian. So the final book is kind of good enough, like a girl you might say hello to in a bar. And then the first 12 pages of the book are the rejection letters, which to me do remain the best part of the novel. Is the rejection. And that's really what it's about. It is an art piece. This is the back cover of the book. We worked with a real librarian who provided us with 4 different legitimate call numbers for Sexy Librarian, depending on whether it would be shelved in the library as a romance, as a book about publishing, or a sculpture, right? An artist's book. So we got all the real call numbers. And we built a website, and Julia, who's a real operator, she had all kinds of parties in Chelsea and got attention and so forth. Because really, when you're doing independent publishing, it's not about selling books. Okay, so all of you out there, whoever's writing, Beautiful Plumber or whatever the next novel is, maybe you're going to sell 100 copies. That's probably what we sold, mostly to Julia's mother. But we got a lot out of it. The book is part of her brand as an artist. It's her way of communicating to people. It was the pretext for all kinds of events. And so that's one way that people can use design in their life. My kids know what design is. This is a book that I did with my sister and my children called D.I.Y. Kids. It's a design book for kids. I'm ruining my children's lives, yes. It's never too early to talk to your child about typography. So like my kids, when they look at like an art book like this, like most art books, they're obviously illustrated by professional artists. And they look at this and they go like, okay, so like I start with an egg, and 3 minutes later I've got like a perfect Disney princess. right? Like, doesn't really quite jive. So in our book, all the art is actually made by kids, so it looks really shitty, but it looks really great. You know, it has that magic quality that kids' work does. This is from the chapter on character design. I call this spread Baby Bauhaus. And when you start with a circle, you end with a circle. There's really no magic transformation happening here. But you do get this living thing, this character that lives with the kid's personality. You can make characters out of anything. Your children can embarrass you. Dust bunnies became important characters, which is not a good reflection on my housekeeping skills, but is a good reflection on their creativity. Aren't children charming? And then, you know, putting your characters on your own stuff, your own products, why not? Say goodbye to Hello Kitty. I'm going to end by showing a few things from my newest book, which is coming out May 12th, 2009. It's called Design Your Life. It's co-authored with my twin sister, Julia. And it's really a book for mad housewives. The kids' book was for kids. This book is for the moms, okay? And we believe that design is everywhere, and that design is an activity and a way of thinking that is part of everything you do, for better or for worse, from the minute you get up, you know, until you finally kill yourself at the end of the day. The book came out of our blog called designyourlife.org, where we pose various questions and worry about various important issues of the day. That's me and my sister in 3rd grade. For example, one of our posts is about the custom of removing your shoes when you go into somebody's house, which turns out, among the Mad Housewife set, this is a hugely controversial issue. Entire families and communities have been torn apart by the question of, should you take your shoes off when you come in and out of the house? And really it's a generational thing, right? That, like, my parents keep their shoes on at their house, but younger housewives are into this kind of mania of cleanliness, and they believe in germs and chemicals from the street and so forth. The older people, they know they live this long, you know, that shoes on the floor is not really going to be a big problem. So it's this generational thing. It's a new custom, and when new customs come in, there's a lot of conflict. And if you think about it, you know, the last big housekeeping drama to equal the shoe thing was the smoking, was the idea of not smoking in the house. And that was also generational, with the younger people saying, I can't have this filth, this pestilence, and the older people saying, well, you just lost your inheritance, you know. This is from a manners book from the 1930s, which, you know, it's really fun to look at manners from previous periods, because you realize that so many things that we think are polite, right? So they would wear gloves and say miss and mister to everyone, but some things were a little bit different. Now, my kids, they don't even know what an ashtray is, right? So when I was in elementary school, we would make ashtrays as Mother's Day gifts. Like, here, Mom, die. Right? So I did a test in my house one summer. We were staying in a rental house, and they had this whole collection of ashtrays, you know, real party people. So I put some M&Ms in an ashtray just to see, would the kids think that was, like, disgusting, like eating ice cream out of the toilet bowl. The M&Ms are gone in seconds, completely demolished. This is from that same manners book. Things change, you know. So maybe 5 years from now, you would just laugh that anybody in the room had shoes on, that you wouldn't enter any dignified space wearing your shoes, but who can say? I am one of the last people in the Western world to carry my luggage, okay? Almost all luggage has wheels on it now, and I know that's because, you know, it's good for people's backs, and they can pack more stuff, right? You can carry 3 seasons worth of clothing for a weekend trip. It's very useful to have wheels on your luggage, but it's always really annoyed me And as a designer, you just can't be annoyed with things. You have to be annoyed for a reason, right? That's what we do. And so I started to analyze, 'cause I travel a lot, and sort of watch the patterns of why is it so annoying? Why does it bug me? I know like our kids are supposed to have wheels on their backpack, right? Now really I think that we have a social problem here. The kids have too much homework. And if they didn't have so much homework, they wouldn't have to drive their backpack off the bus. I mean, what's next, right? I can see like a little train behind everyone, the iPod, the wallet, the lunch, everything on wheels. Like, you can't carry anything, right? It's just much too difficult. This is a Weber grill that you can carry through airport security, no problem. Okay, so here's two guys, right? And the one guy is carrying his stuff, and the other guy has it trailing behind him. Now, of course, they take up different amounts of space, but that's a free country, and as much as you can drag behind you, please do so. But here's the thing, is that when you're carrying your stuff, you're aware of it physically, and you kind of know how big you are and how much space you take. But when your stuff is, rolling behind you, like the whole point of it is that you can forget about it, right? And so you transfer that responsibility to all the people around you who aren't supposed to trip over your stuff, right? So I figured out there's nothing wrong with roller bags. It's genius. Excellent. It's the people using it. Right, and the way they don't pay attention. On the escalator, you go like stumbling over somebody's bag. And they're mad at me, right, because they forgot about their luggage. I'm supposed to remember, right? So there's nothing wrong with the object. It's the behavior. I think that's a fascinating thing about design is that often its big impact on our life is not what it looks like or what the materials are or how much it costs. It's how it makes us act, right? It's how it... I'm going to try this my next trip out here. There's all kinds of techniques used all over the world. I figure, why not just motorize the whole thing, right? You could just be on top of the luggage. It could be a hybrid, right? It need not hurt the environment to drive your luggage. I will write on anything. When I was growing up, we had this kind of toilet paper holder in our bathroom. And what would happen is that you would come to the end of the toilet paper and you would leave the little brown thing on there for weeks. No one would ever take it off. Because it's really a lot of work to do that, right? It has a spring-loaded mechanism. It takes 2 hands and at least 6 different operations to put the fresh roll and take the old brown one off. You wouldn't bother, right? It's really, that's a lot of work. And so now there's alternative designs which are much better, and there's a lot of risk here. Like I could take my piece of toilet paper and the whole thing could fly across the room, right? So the spring-loaded one gives this incredible security. The toilet paper will never go anywhere. But here, I get better behavior. So people in my house are more likely to put a fresh roll on because you can do it with one hand. Okay? Now, on college campuses and other public places, you see this. Toilet paper with a key. Okay, and that's because people steal toilet paper. Right? It's expensive and you have to go to the store. It's a very, arduous task. So if you don't lock it, people will take it, right? So here's another behavioral thing, right? The toilet paper thieves have to be stopped. So here's an experimental design where it's the architect Shigeru Ban, who's very known for creating architecture out of paper tubes. And he was invited to create an experimental toilet paper roll. And he said, what we will do, we will make a square core instead of a round one. And then when the people, they go to take the toilet paper off, it'll bump against the wall and they won't take too much. So it will inhibit their behavior. Like how some people wrap their whole arm in toilet paper? You wouldn't do that if you had to work this hard, Okay, so there's an experiment about behavior, about changing people's behavior. This is my laundry bin, $3.99 from IKEA, excellent design, translucent plastic so you can see whether it's full or not, but you don't have to really see what's in there. The lid, genius. The little holes on the top are a handle, but they also aerate the material inside, which is very nice. So great design. Unfortunately, people in my house will throw their laundry at it instead of lifting the lid. It's a lot of work to lift that lid, right? So you just throw your stuff at it. So I have this dilemma. Do I throw away the lid, which I like, which is cool and like neat? I decided to keep it because there's this other great use. It's an awesome little table. I know it's kind of gross, but it's right there next to the TV, and I can have my breakfast. And right, so sometimes you have to make compromises. I travel a lot. I stay in a lot of hotels, and I've noticed that the more pillows there are on the bed, the more luxurious the accommodations, right? And pillows are a great example of a functional object, right? An ergonomic object with relationship to your body, and you can customize your furniture and all this great. But they're also very symbolic, right? It's this purely kind of statement of taste and wealth and luxury, like an image of luxury. And here I am traveling alone, and I'm as creative as the next person in the bedroom, but what am I supposed to do with 8 pillows, right? So just taking them off the bed is quite a challenge, sort of geometric problem solving, before I can even get in and do whatever it is I do want to do by myself in the bed. Now here, this is the lovely Yorktown Inn in York, Pennsylvania. Here I thought I was safe. Okay, this bedspread has not been laundered since 1986. And that's like what a bed's supposed to look like. But I pull back the bedspread, and there they are. Half a dozen of them, huddled together for warmth. Little ones, baby ones. So in our book, we look at, the different ways that people make their bed. That's like a design statement. In a recession, it's a great way to redecorate your bedroom for very little money is just move the pillows around, right? And say something new about yourself. So the dread spread is that kind of classic. It's like the lady's bosom, right? Tucked under, nice and square. The matronly sort of traditional bed, whereas the wedding cake, decorators use this term wedding cake to refer to lots of pillows organized in descending order with the tiny ones on top. No room in there for the couple, but lots of room for the wedding, right? McMansions, there's whole stores where you go to buy furniture for your McMansion because normal furniture looks too little. And so they have these giant beds that actually you have to go up on steps, and you need separate bedding that's like super thick bedding, and it's like this insane. If you go to IKEA, you can't even buy a king-size bed at IKEA because IKEA is a global company, and people in other parts of the world do not have king-size beds that are wider than they are. That's ridiculous. But here we have these kind of giant beds and different ways of making them. Does anybody here not make your bed at all? I see a few honest people. Okay, so I have a name for you. Okay, you're the existentialists. Okay, because really, isn't it all a lie? These people that make it all neat in the morning, right? Make it look like it's all new and clean. It's not clean, right? The same farts and skin cells, right? So the existentialist, I'm with you there. Of course, I can't live that way, but I respect your philosophy. The poet, that's for W.H. Auden, who is a great poet, known not only for his poetry, but for his insanely messy apartment. And he just kept his bed covered with books and papers. which makes sense. I was at a lunch some years ago for a colleague who had just adopted a baby girl, and she from China. And my colleague was a single woman. She was going to live in New York with as a single mother with this baby. She's very brave, amazing act. And we had a lunch for her, and she was happy, she was proud, and she was really, really tired. I mean, she was wiped out from the whole experience. And one of the other women at the table, she said, what you need is a husband. And this is like really not the right thing to say. And there's this kind of silence. And then quickly the married woman goes, no, what I mean is one of those pillows, like a corduroy pillow with little arms, and you can sit in bed and smoke cigarettes and drink beer and take care of your baby, like all at once. Oh, it's that kind of husband. Well, everyone should have a husband. I would have a husband if they weren't so terrible to look at, right? And think of all the other kinds of mates and friends that we could have. And then when you get tired of your husband, you can try the wedge. Okay, now the wedge, I'm told, is an ergonomic pillow designed for lovemaking. And it elevates the pelvis in just the right way, whatever. Very embarrassing. I don't know if it's true. But one thing I do know is it does pose decorating challenges. I'm gonna end by just telling you a few things about underwear. Okay, and so for the guys in the room, my apologies, this is all true. But I want you to leave with some really useful information. At Cooper-Hewitt in New York, where I work, there's this lingerie store right near the museum, and I have to walk past it every day, and they had this huge poster in the window proclaiming that 80% of American women are wearing the wrong size bra, and that this makes you look older, and it makes you look tired, it lowers your credit rating, it has all these terrible... So I walk by it every day, and I'm going to go in, right? I actually need an appointment, so I made an appointment to have, this. And so I found out some things, the truth about bras. And I urge all of you to go and get fitted, guys and girls, very useful experience. So here's the thing, 80% of American women, it's all the same mistake, okay? And here's what we're doing wrong. We're wearing a band size that is too big and a cup size that is too small. That's it. Okay, and so the band is like riding up her back, causing the stuff in front to drop. And really, you got to have the band be nice and tight because architecturally, that's what's holding up the breasts. Okay, and the function of the cup is to add shape. Right, and those shapes change with fashion. We've had bullets and ice cream cones and hamburger buns and all different shapes. I would like to see truly modernist bras in the future, a more pure kind of geometry, but that's the function of the cup, and it's really the band that's holding up the goods, okay? And there's all different possibilities architecturally. But at the end of the day, even if you go get fitted, get a proper bra, it's never really going to fit because they don't match, okay? And everything comes back to typography, okay? There is no true symmetry in the human body. So you do the best you can, okay? And then finally, one more underwear thing. My grandmother... was part of a generation that would not leave the house without a girdle. Okay, now usually she had other clothes on as well. But the girdle was, when I was a little kid, this was a very scary thing. It had like fins and gussets and straps, and it was very mechanical, very technological. And I knew when, my mother didn't wear one, she was a hippie. And I knew when I grew up, I was not going to wear that. Not cool, right? Very terrifying. Little did I know how times would change, and that there are new underwear technologies directed at a new generation. These are called power panties. The big brand name is Spanx. Again, guys, I'm sorry, but this is true. And Spanx are made out of Lycra, seamless Lycra, and it's incredibly tight. And they hold together your body and prevent it from moving. There are women in New York, young women, who would never leave the house without their Spanx because they prevent panty lines, which apparently is a terrible thing. Now, the thing about Spanx, in addition to being very uncomfortable, is that where the material meets your body, the flesh does rebel. So they make it in different sizes, depending on how much coverage you need. And that's really the only solution, okay? All right. So that's it. Thank you. So I believe we're going to have a few questions. And if you have a question, we have some lovely attendants here who have microphones. We want you to ask your question into the microphone. Or you can reveal some embarrassing information if you like. Yeah, Colleen?
It's hard to top the underwear tips. Thank you. What suggestions do you have for improving design education and making it relevant in today's fast-paced society, in addition to teaching designers to write?
Oh, in addition, okay. Well, I think, typography is the basis of graphic design, and we need to do it all the time from sophomore up to the end. You should never stop studying typography. And typography and writing go together really well, so you could solve both problems at the same time. A lot of faculty complain that they have to teach too much software and that students have so much they have to learn, and wouldn't it be great if we could just teach ideas? And I really disagree with that. I think that software is the stuff that we deal with. It's the industry that we live in, and that you can teach software in a way that is idea-oriented. So, I teach typography, and of course we teach it with InDesign, and you're learning the software and the principles at the same time. When I studied typography in the early 80s, it was just like pencil sketches on tracing paper. There was no typography. It was all fake. It was all fantasy because no one could afford actual typography. Now, what my students can learn in a month, because they have the technology, is stunning. It would take us years to learn that. So I think, one of the challenges is integrating software with thinking and not thinking of it as that annoying stuff, that it's actually part of what we do. And it's also the gateway that brings design, a lot of students to design in the first place. So we got to kind of embrace that, in my opinion. Any other questions?
I have a question about your book projects.
Yes?
How does that work in class? Does everybody in the class work on it? And then they all publish it? How do you, that's a very intriguing idea.
Yeah, it's challenging, to write a book with 18 people, which we did with the D.I.Y. book. I run it a little bit differently depending on what the project is. But the goal is and these are graduate students, so they're working at a high level, is that they're creating work that communicates ideas beyond itself, right? So the students that did the business card chapter in the D.I.Y. book, they had to design all those business cards and think about what lessons they were conveying through the design. And then they also wrote the text that went with it. But the design was the meat of it. The text is explanatory. But they had to create a series of designs that tells a story about what's possible in a business card. So that's sort of how it works. Yeah. Other questions?
Hi, Ellen. Excuse
Hi.
me. You had a picture of Facebook up there, and you're clearly, obviously engaged in social media. And I was just wondering, how you feel about it in general, and secondly, do you think designers are embracing it as a way to communicate, and what do you think is the potential for us as a profession using social media?
Well, it's a great way to waste time. I mean, I can't do it as much as I would like because, I mean, it's really fun. It's very narcissistic, and it eats up your time. I think designers are doing it as much as everybody else. I don't know that they're doing it more, but, most of the people on my friends list are designers, and they have clubs, and they promote themselves, and I find that interesting that it's just another way of communicating. But it does really eat up time. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, I need to repeat the question. Or you'll...
Where are your graduate students ending up?
Well, they do all kinds of things. Some of them teach, some of them work for firms like the Discovery Channel or design studios. A lot of them are interested in teaching, and they do that. They go all over the country. I have international students. Some of them stay in the U.S. Some of them go home and work. But it's quite a diverse range of things that they do. Some of them get into publishing. They fall in love with that. I see a question here.
It seems like some of the things in your book project at the end that you were talking about are about experience design. Do you teach that at all?
Okay, the question was about experience design, and do we teach experience design? Yeah, to some degree. One of the projects I did with my graduate students was designing a conference. We held a conference at MICA that was an AIGA design education conference, and the students were involved in designing it as an event and in creating experiences for people to engage in beyond just sitting in a chair and listening to lectures. I wouldn't say we're teaching it formally as a discipline. That's an interesting area, but it's sort of beyond our... To be really focused on it as a discipline isn't going to fit into our curriculum, but it's something we talk about and do where we can. Yeah. I see one more.
Is it you, Lisa? Okay.
Hi, you seem interested in bringing design to the masses, and I wonder if you have answers for people who have anxieties about the deprofessionalization of it.
Well, I think that the best way for people to learn about any art form is to actually do it. And so when we think about music education, we don't worry that by teaching our kids to play piano, they're going to put the symphony out of business. That by exposing people to the how of something, it raises their appreciation for it at the highest level, right? So if your neighbor wants a business card, and they make it themselves, that's not really a job that you were going to do anyway if you have a design studio. Or like my sister, who's an English professor, a tenured Shakespeare scholar, and she's obsessed with graphic design, right? She designs invitations and programs and everybody's bar mitzvah stuff, and it's like, she's really not taking business away from you. And you don't want her to be your client, I promise you. That a lot of what's happening with the so-called deprofessionalization is just more design, different design being produced than what you're going to do in your studio. But what's happening is that there's a higher level of understanding of the field. So, today people say graphic design and not graphics design, because there's like a broader understanding of the discipline, which is actually good for us. And I think that, there was a time when designers were guarding their secrets, Right, and now we live in an open society. There's no secrets. All the knowledge that you want, you can find at your fingertips. So instead of trying to protect our knowledge, I think we're better off promoting it. And that's why I spend so much energy, you know. I'll talk about design to anyone who will listen, right? Because it's like, this is what we do. And I feel like if people understand it better, they'll love us more. Ignorance does not create love. Knowledge does. Okay. One more question? Okay.
Thank you. Does your mom know what you do? That's my final question. Does she understand? Yeah.
She does, yes. I believe I have achieved
Nailed
that.
it.
That
Got
one
it.
thing in my life I can put to bed, yes. But maybe you'll have to ask her.
Do your kids understand what you do?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're ruined. They're like, my daughter will come home and complain about how the other girls in the class use Comic Sans. So one small victory. Okay, well, thank you very much.